So I'm sure that could be a different discussion on its own. But let's fast forward to March 2020. And we sort of entered March 2020 with less than 80 of the 2019 reviews still to be actioned. But we had a plan in place as well, where all the reviews that were going to be carried out from January 2020 onwards, strategically we put plans in place that meant that we were not going to get into a position again where they had such a backlog. And actually, at the beginning of March, we were in a really privileged position because we not only had pretty much cracked the backlog, but we had also got down to a situation where we were turning reviews around from them landing in our inbox, so to speak, and then getting them out as proposed amended within 4 weeks. So we were in this really great position, and we were quite excited about what that meant for the future. And then came COVID-19, which kind of started to scupper that. So really, my first discussion point that I'd like people to be involved in is, what concerns and questions did you find that schools, our health professionals and colleagues, parents suddenly start asking at the beginning of lockdown about reviews? So please feel free to pop your hand up, put something in the chat box. Offer. So it's just about sort of sharing that and seeing what experiences people had right at the beginning of lockdown. So anyone want to kick off? No.
There's always that awkward pause as people are furiously typing.
Well, I popped a few things on a slide actually that thought maybe the next slide would actually generate a little bit of spark of thoughts. So this was some of the things that within days of lockdown, within days of schools being closed, yeah, absolutely, Laura saying people were concerned that annual reviews would stop altogether. Yeah, and that was kind of one of ours. What's happening with Joe Blocks's annual review? Should we cancel it? Or and I love it when people ask a question and they ask for support, because it means that we can get that conversation going, and we can start coming up with plans. But then we had statements in like, well, we've cancelled so-and-so's annual review and we're not going to do it again until schools reopen. And at first we were kind of like, oh, right, well, obviously we haven't got any guidance and we're not sure, cancelling it, that doesn't quite sound right to us, and are quite concerned about that. But then as things sort of over that first few weeks moved on, we ended up as well with obviously people started to consider that schools perhaps wouldn't be reopened until September, and schools and some parents were saying to us, well, we're going to cancel it for this year because they're not going to be in school till September, so we can't really do it, and we'll do it in the next academic year, which obviously was a great concern for us as a local authority as much as anything, because of the backlog that we had already managed to get through. Laura's saying hopefully the annual reviews would be virtual so health professionals can attend. But these are routinely being done by the SEND caseworker over the phone. That's quite disappointing to hear that, Laura, actually, because I think we've quite successfully done a number of annual reviews virtually via Teams. In fact, I had one yesterday afternoon, and I was going to sort of say contrary to that. So that's a really interesting perspective. Absolutely, parents having technology again, and I think we'll probably come to that a little bit more as we move through, because we're going to have a look at some of the sort of pros and cons of that. So I don't know if anyone else has got any other experience of anything different that the concerns kind of came in. So they were some of the questions that we were faced with. I've had several via Teams, no health involved with the students have been successful. Yeah, absolutely. But I've had some via Teams with health involved, some without health. Obviously depends on the individual. So if we just move on to the next slide. So sorry, the dilemma that we were faced with. Oh right, therapists were redeployed. I think that's probably quite a very key point as well. Yeah, and Hannah, thank you for that. We found most schools are holding Teams meeting and more professionals are attending than usual. And that was something that I probably will summarise later on as well, because I think that was certainly the case as we're finding it. So obviously there's quite a lot of questions towards the start of the lockdown, the uncertainty of how long the schools were going to be off for, because none of us knew. You know, there was talk originally, wasn't there, about us going back after Easter. For knots, obviously, bearing in mind that we had this significant backlog that we were nearly on top of, we actually had a whole new set of concerns about whether the reviews would slow down to a point of there wasn't going to be enough work coming in for our seconded, this created team of plan writers. So we were quite worried about it at that point, but because knowing that we might have a point of stoppage, but then when the reviews started back up again, we would end up back in a bottleneck situation of backlog because we couldn't just cope with the sheer number that are coming in. So they were our first concerns, and obviously in the first few weeks there was little to no government guidelines, and of course when those guidelines did come out, they haven't, as we've already heard in the presentations before, the statutory timescales are still in operation. In some ways, that knowing that was actually quite a welcome piece of news for us, because it meant that we could then start pushing schools and colleges to carry out annual reviews, so we could manage our workload moving forward. And obviously the solution, as many of you have already said, was about moving towards online platforms to try and keep within those statutory timescales. You know, they had that bigger impact, and certainly when we keep going back to the young people as well, that how important it is, especially those that were in key stage transfers, or year 10 or year 5, who were in those positions of kind of thinking about what their next stages were, that it was really important to keep things bubbling forward. So just a sort of another discussion point really, and a few of you have sort of already doubly answered this already, but what are the benefits and concerns with carrying out online reviews? I'd like to hear your kind of thoughts, so please feel free to pop your hand up and speak. That's not a problem. So any benefits and concerns with those online and online reviews? We've already said about parents not necessarily having the technology. Is there anything else that people have found has worked well for them or has not worked as well? Yeah, thanks, Laura. Yep, certainly more people able to attend. Yep, the lack of having to travel too far can be a certain benefit. And Jacqueline, I would absolutely agree with you that colleges have been quite innovative, and actually it would be one of the things that I would say that we took our lead from really, was some of our GFEs. That actually came to me and said, "Oh, not to worry. We've often done Teams or online reviews anyway." And we were kind of like, "Right, well, let's kind of learn from you." Families with one laptop, so we can't be at the review and doing homeschooling at the same time. Yeah, absolutely. That can be an issue. Sarah, you've made a good point that I'm actually going. It brings me on to my next slide in a moment, but certainly about how the young person's attendance is being involved. Hannah, we've had some good experiences in some ways with having the laptop set up and the family sat on the settee all together, and it being built into part of that learning process as well, trying to keep it very much around that young person. But yeah, of course, the technology is always a bit of a concern. And so if we just move on then, so Sarah's made a really fantastic point there about yeah, and concerns about which platforms to use. I mean, I don't know about anyone else, we were kind of thinking about using Zoom to start with, and then there was some concerns about the security of that, but Teams seems to have been the most stable platform. So I think one of the things is about trying to, you know, when you're in the school and it's or you're in that young person's setting, that they have a familiarity with that and they're quite confident with that setting, and even if they only come in and are involved for 10 minutes or so, you know, or with a smaller group of people, that it is easier to get them involved. But one of the things that we're really keen on at Knots was, and it's a bigger piece of work, I suppose, more than just the getting reviews online, is about that young person's involvement, and where possible asking them to be involved. Now I put this up here because gathering the views of the young person is obviously so important, and just a couple of questions really. Does the young person have an opportunity to have their view heard and recorded? Is there an opportunity to celebrate achievements? So they're quite important things. Now, we had a young person, I believe that she was linked to Notts County Council. She was one of our learners with an EHCP, and she wasn't keen on the forms that the LA sent out, and so she actually created her own form. So I thought it was quite relevant today to pop up the link on the slide just here, because of the Council for Disabled Children, and it's just a little bit more of a user-friendly form. So we started building that into our kind of pre-review documents on there as well. So if I just come to the discussion points on here. Oh, thanks, Philippa. Yeah, Zoom now fully end-to-end encrypted. That is definitely worth a mention, because I think that becomes a little bit easier, doesn't it, if parents are doing it on phones. Zoom as an app is a bit easier. Parents allowing the young person to speak. In meetings, parents often looking at the professionals, but looking at their own view of them on the sofa. Parents sees the young person wants to say something, more comfortable in their own home. Absolutely, and can so like we were saying, it can be a real benefit as well. And we've certainly had some really productive ones. And even if the young person is not able to contribute fully to the review, they can kind of come and wave and say hello, and we've engaged with them and for a few minutes before they've decided themselves that's enough contribution. But it is lovely, because a lot of the time we don't always have that contact with the young people. So can I ask how your schools contact health professionals prior to an annual review? I've come across or relating to outdated health schools have not requested the updated info. I mean, I think probably that would be an interesting question to put out to the other experience in the workshop. I mean, we send out a pack to our schools. If you noticed earlier, I spoke about our service organizer, and she sends out a pack to all our schools, and we've got some flow charts and clear guidance on there. So it's slightly an expectation, really, that our schools would contact those health professionals. Has anyone used a single advice template to obtain help supporting evidence prior to the annual review? We certainly do a particular template that we send out, but obviously it would try and come through the schools directly. We would be encouraging the schools to do that. In Lancashire, Blackburn and Darwin and Blackpool, we have produced a flowchart for schools. That sounds fantastic. Kay, I don't know if you were be interested in perhaps sharing that with us. That sounds like a fantastic resource there. Yes, Sarah, that's how we would approach it as well. Are the flowcharts available to access? These can be shared. Would appreciate any sharing of forms or documents. Philippa, is that something that we can perhaps coordinate at some point?
Problem.
Because I think there's lots and lots of really good practice there, and I think it would be fantastic to share that.
I'll take a note of your email, Carol, if that's all right, and I'll get in touch.
Encourage our schools to. Sorry, I'm just reading the discussion points as well. So views of young people. I mean, as many different bits of good practice that we can share. That I think the better, because you know, one of the things that I find with the sort of work with the statutory code of practice is how open to interpretation the code can be, and the processes, and as a contractor I've worked across quite a few different local authorities, and it is one of those things where you see, you know, you can be a little bit magpie and try and take out the best practice from each. So, you know, people who are in a local authority is you know, in that one job, I think it would be fabulous for us to have that. So I'll just move on to another few points really. A few discussion points, and it might be an opportunity here really. This was sort of the main bulk, so please feel free to take the mic and join in. Positive experiences people would like to share. Obviously we'd all like to hear about those. Situations that you might try and avoid in the future with using online platforms. Any particular difficulties that you have or have been overcome? How has it impacted on the management of workload? I mean, we've sort of spoke about that a little bit before. You know, some people actually saying, do you know what, we can be more effective in this way because it's easier to get everybody together. And my kind of question really, I'm really curious on is, how has COVID-19 situation changed things for the future? Would you return solely to face-to-face reviews, or would you still be encouraged to use technology? You know, they're quite an interesting perspective. Sarah saying she prefers face-to-face reviews, but a place for virtual technology too. I think that probably is the conclusion that I've come to as well. We've had some real good successes, but sometimes you know, bringing everybody together in a room is certainly you know, if there's a myriad of changes, I think that it can be a little bit easier. And I think you perhaps got to be led a little bit by the family and the school. Does anyone who's working for local authority, do you all pretty much delegate the responsibility to your schools to organise and hold the annual reviews on your behalf? Yeah. Absolutely. We're already planning on holding, that's interesting, Hannah, we're already planning on holding a virtual reviews, but that was on the cards for some reviews. And I think probably Cheshire is quite an interesting geographical location, a bit like Notts. You know, we cover such a huge range of physical area, and in the middle of our patch, if you like, is actually Nottingham City. So they kind of sit right in the middle as we sit around the outside of that. So that's quite geographically, it has an interesting perspective. So I think that's really interesting, actually, that everybody is they are delegating, they are asking and looking towards schools for them to lead on these. Laura, I would opt for virtual, but parental preference would say, yeah, absolutely. And I can understand sometimes our health professionals, you know, their time and travel time is really challenging. So has anyone had any particular difficulties that they've had to overcome? We've had some reluctance for parents to engage with a review. I don't know if that's something that other people have experienced. And we've kind of just had to persuade them that really we don't, like we said earlier, we didn't want that to link into the next academic year. Really thought it was important to make sure that reviews stay within the academic year as far as possible. So I think what we ended up doing with some of our more reluctant cases is obviously when the Senkos and head teachers would contact us, because of the slight more freedom, we would actually offer to say, well, how about if we as one of the review team is able to virtually contribute to that, and usually that has swayed them to make that review happen. Most of the parents have been glad with the opportunity, but we have had to have our tech team. Yeah, that's and that's brilliant that you've actually got the tech team that can do that and support them. Outsource the annual, right? That's a very interesting question, Leslie. I don't know. I'd be interested to see what other people's views are on that. Not obviously. Back in December, decided to not do the outsourcing of these annual reviews, but to bring on its own team to tackle the backlog. But I think more key was not just about clearing that backlog, was actually about how can we put into place plans so we don't end up in this situation again. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, and I suppose I know that some of you will be in local authorities that operate a case working model. Yeah, increase the team. We have now. All right, that's interesting. That's interesting, Hannah. And interim, yeah, that's pretty much where we are up to. I think, has anybody sort of experienced, do they feel like your reviews have slowed down? I mean, initially, probably everybody felt like their reviews slowed down a little bit. How has the pace of review been happening? Has it picked up again? Are you seeing, sorry, my computer keeps pinging at me. Are you seeing an increase in reviews again? Colleges are churning them out. I can completely appreciate that. It's stayed pretty stable. That would be our experience, Jacqueline, with colleges and some of our special schools seemingly suddenly on bulk sending in absolutely loads of annual reviews. I'm wondering sometimes with colleges, I think perhaps they they found a little bit of gained time, and maybe we found that some of the ones that should have been done the back end of last year were suddenly being done, and were being produced. So slower now, picked up, dealing with a backlog. Yeah, it feels like sometimes it bottlenecks, doesn't it? And then you've got a restructure to deal with. Are there appendices with reports from health professionals within the review? How do you determine what has been prescribed by the health versus what the school parent would prefer in relation to health procedures? We would expect, Andrea, that yes, that they were included, and we would expect the schools to collate all of those and send all of those reports in. How would you determine what has been prescribed by the health professionals versus now? I'd be interested in what other people think about that, because I would say, Andrea, that actually if a health professional is making a recommendation, and that is a professional recommendation, and that would be looked upon in terms of health above and beyond what the school and parent wanted, because it becomes an assessed need if it's a health professional's report. Yeah, some schools have held review which were not due until September, as they wanted to avoid them getting stuck in a predicted overloads of reviews in September. Yeah, and I've seen that as well, Hannah. Not as many, but if anything, I'd rather that they were early than late. So I've got another couple of slides I thought I'd share with you. So this is kind of where our current position is, because obviously we found ourselves in a difficult situation. So as of June 2020, however, the backlog from 2019 is now clear. I think we've just got 14 or so plans that we're waiting to finalise. So the team have managed to keep clear of that. We've actually, I just asked generally that question to everybody about how they felt that the reviews were going. We've looked, and we've actually had about 50% of reviews, the reviews that have been due since March, and we've had about 50% of them still being completed on time. Unfortunately, I don't have the data to compare that to for the last 3 years as I would have liked. Obviously, as a sort of parachute team coming in, it's not always as easy to see that, but we had about 50% of reviews. However, I think one of the positive things has been about our additional communication with parents, because we've obviously had to move away from, and I'm sure other local authority colleagues will experience this more, that we've moved away from sending out paper plans to parents and having to go to secure emails. So we've put a little stepping stone in place where our plan writers actually call the parents as they are about to start work on making amendments. Thanks, Philippa, that's brilliant. As they're about to start making amendments, they call the parents, and it's an opportunity to check their email address, and we've written a little bit of a script, but a few bullet points that the plan writers make sure that they cover off with the parents, so they doubly check that the parents understand that they will have the 15 days to reply and to make any further suggestions, etc. And that has been, so I have to say that despite we've only got the 50% of the reviews in, we've actually, the communication with parents has been vastly improved. So we are still now back up to about a list of about 200 reviews that we need to process. So our plan writers were taken off of their work for a couple of weeks to make additional calls to parents to check that what the schools were telling us that they were offering was being offered, and that they were satisfied with the school's commitment. So we did end up losing a couple of weeks of plan writing. So I think we're banking a little bit perhaps on the rest of this term that's traditionally a bit quieter for reviews, being able to kind of really clear those ones we've got sat in our inbox, and so we've got that fresh platform. So just to finish off, I'd just like, if you wouldn't mind, just to put, and I thought this might be something then that Philippa could pop into the notes, Just a final comment really, please, in the chat room for a top tip for carrying out or supporting reviews online, or maybe from our health professionals that are with us, perhaps something you would like us as the LA to consider when we're arranging and dealing and organising with these annual reviews. So I'd appreciate your comments on that, please.
Please, Lauren.
Is now exiting.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Be succinct, like it, and clear about what is required. Perfect. Provide health professionals with enough notice to provide reports as part of review. They should be doing that 6 weeks before the review date, Andrea. Your schools should be giving you a 6 weeks notice. Ensure the health info is updated. Absolutely. Yeah, prepare the parents in advance. Yeah. It'll be useful to have a list of annual reviews due each term to health professionals. Yeah, that's something that we've worked on with our health lead as well. And I think it is really important. We've talked quite a lot about that at Knots. But we need to decide. What we didn't want to happen, Kay, was we didn't want our health lead to just have a list of annual reviews when perhaps in that term or in that month coming up, there was only 10 of them that had got health requirements and the others didn't have health requirements. We were a bit conscious of how we got around that in terms of GDPR. So it's something we never really kind of 100% nailed down before our attention was diverted, but something we need to come back to, and I'm sure other people have got different ways of doing it. An early preparation to ensure all parties can access. Yeah, I think that's a really important thing. Right, thank you everybody. I'll pass you back over to Philippa. Thank you for your time and your contribution.
Thanks everyone, and thanks Victoria. So you've got a 10-minute break now before you join your second workshop. If you've got any more top tips that you're still typing away, that's fine. They will still pop up in this chat and I'll still get them into my notes. But do go make yourself a cup of tea, coffee, step away from the screen for 10 minutes and your next session will start at 10 to 4.
Karen, please.
Is now exiting.